So, Maya Nelson, I am so honored and privileged to have you here today.
Mm.
Found you on Podmatch, and it was such a good connection. And I wanted to just kind of talk about, I reviewed your information right before we started this, and
Mhm.
what you bring to the table about the intersection of neurodivergence and equity and inclusion
Mhm.
and trauma and all of that.
Mhm.
And what are folks like me who have been white privileged and didn't even know that was a thing until once you see it, you can't unsee it. So I've spent the
Right.
last 2 years deconstructing that privilege and
Yeah.
deciding how to use what I have been given but not earned by virtue of the
Right.
skin I'm in this country, how to use
Mhm.
that for good in the going forward in the places where I lead. And most women lead everywhere they sit, at every table
It's
you are
true.
at, the dinner table
Yeah.
or the conference room or the church
Hmm.
pew. People are
Absolutely.
watching how we live our life. Children learn what they live. And so
Right.
please welcome, tell us everything we ever need to know, and nobody had the courage to say.
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, what a starting point here. And thank you so much for even allowing me onto your platform. But I think there is so much to be known as far as like supporting those who may look a little different or have different backgrounds. The fact that you even recognize this, though, and you're willing to deconstruct it, I think it's a great step towards humanity because I feel like that's really what was sacrificed. And many European descended individuals did not sign up for that, but that's what kind of happened. And while there are benefits, being able to see that and trying to kind of redirect it or trying to help others, I think it's really a humbling, but also like a beautiful thing to kind of bring forth, you know?
Thank
Um,
you. And
so
once you see it, you can't unsee it. And
absolutely.
I am the person who is always pulling out the elephant in the living room. If the elephant has to be in my living room, then we're going to put that on the
Right.
table too to dissect.
Absolutely. I'm kind of wondering when there's pushback, especially from those of your own like racial group. How do
Mhm.
you kind of navigate that?
Well, I tell you, I do things in baby steps. And so if there's any part of you that believes that anybody else in our environment is not as human as you are, that's a
Right.
non-starter. We're not having
Mm.
conversation because I'm not casting pearls before swine and I'm not wasting my words.
Right.
Simple. Okay.
Got
So
you.
when we start, so I'm specific about the women I will work with, and I'm looking for women over 40 who
Hmm.
want to advance racial equity in our country in our lifetime. So it's
Right.
not enough to be an ally and kick the can down the road. That ship has sailed. We've got about 20 years to make a significant difference here for the generations that follow. And
Absolutely.
I am heavily committed into saying the quiet parts out loud. And they'll
Absolutely.
hear things from me that they won't hear from you because
Mm.
in their filters that they don't even know. I didn't know that I was looking at our social structures through any kind of filter or lens. It was a lens of bias that I was born into, that I was raised in, that is reinforced by the systems in our society that I had no awareness of. So Maya Angelou, once you know better, you do better.
Absolutely.
We're doing better.
That's so serious. I love it. Really looking at society at large. And it's interesting that you talk about how invisible it kind of is until it's pointed out. It really is telling of the indoctrination that kind of happens through our lives. And I feel like in therapy and in other spaces too, there's an opportunity to really confront that and to kind of see that. It's interesting for me when I've worked with, in particular, white men or women, seeing how race kind of comes into the mix at times, like you were talking about, maybe not hearing what I'm saying as much and having to repeat it and being like, hey, remember when I brought this up? And then kind of bringing it up like, hey, what do you think that's about? And it's interesting seeing people battle with that cognitive dissonance and
Yeah.
still kind of choose comfort in a weird way. And that happens too, even with classism. I've had
Right.
clients who make ridiculous amounts of money And they're trying to balance with their morality between supporting people in power who can help them financially, but that are going to harm people they care about.
Yes, absolutely.
So there's a lot of kind of delving in there and trying to find balance overall.
Now, you are a marriage and family therapist. Tell me about what therapy
Mhm.
do.
I don't work mostly with marriage and family. I work with mostly individual therapy and group
Okay.
therapy,
Okay.
with immigrants, predominantly people of color, women and queer individuals is really where I specialize. And so there's a lot of those groups being marginalized and being ignored. And I think it's interesting to kind of see things on the opposite side of the coin. For you, it's so much of becoming aware of this and recognizing that while you have had agency and done great things, there may have been other things kind of helping along the way. I think for many of these other groups, it's trying to battle with themselves, recognizing this thing may be working against them and still trying to find the hope to keep living and to create and to inspire and so on. So it's really an interesting process either way.
Yes. And so you asked me a hard question in the beginning. What do you do when you get pushed back? So I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
ask you, what do you do when someone with your skin color comes in with white supremacy?
Absolutely. Well,
Because
within
we're all steeped in the same tea here.
absolutely. In what context do you mean, in therapy or just in
Yeah,
general?
well, yeah, in therapy, when they're in therapy
Mm-hmm.
and you see that this thread of white privilege runs because I had a hard awareness not long ago because I assumed that white privilege was restricted to white skin and I was wrong.
Mm. Like internalized, like,
Internalized, yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
got you.
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about that experience?
That experience was that I was I had been invited to collaborate with some people. And I made some assumptions that it was a white person and a person of color. So I immediately say, okay, then we have diversity here. And as we got into it, when I saw an elephant in the living room of the way that this organization was mm, minimizing and
Mm-hmm.
denying and talking down to, not allowing
Mm-hmm.
every voice at the table, didn't even want to give a
Right.
seat at the table. It was coming from a black man, and I had assumed walking
Mm-hmm.
into the room that this was going to be a true collaboration. But this person had military background as well, and they just pulled rank and did what I have experienced in corporate America, being the only woman in the C-suite
Yeah.
uh, over my career, and it was like I was blindsided. I didn't know that I have a slogan that says colorblind is still blind. This is not something to aspire to, but I was colorblind when I thought
Mm-hmm.
that that privilege and supremacy had something to do with the way you look, because it
Right.
doesn't.
I hear you. I definitely think like the privilege itself, absolutely, to the way you look, depending on what it is. But I think the belief systems, the indoctrination, it doesn't matter who it is. And I think it's interesting you bring this up because I could say to you, what about those friends or family members or community members that you may not share the same values, who are not choosing to grow, who are seeing these things and they're kind of like, no, let me hunker down. I think what that black male you're witnessing is him not really dealing with kind of the oppression and what it's saying to him, from society. Instead of rejecting it, to him, it may seem more comfortable, especially what I've heard from other Black people in the military. It is very hierarchical, which is what is classism, what is sexism, what is all of that? It's hierarchy, right? It's not harmony. And so he probably was inundated with that. And I've heard so many racist, extremely racist things happening in the military. So for
Mhm.
him, this may be, he's a rebel in comparison
Right.
to what it could be. And I know that sounds really sad, but that is the reality. Also, as Black people tend to move up in society, what do we tend to notice around us? It tends to get wider, with all honesty, even in education. And so if you're not willing to become that to some extent, you may not get any type of seat at the table. And if you try to create your own seat, Black people are often redlined. Their towns are burned down. So it's kind of like, where do you pick your poison? Do I
Yeah.
continue with the military, maybe get a good life and have to tap dance? Or do I choose poverty and have my pride? But then now I'm struggling to kind of move up in certain areas. And so when I encounter that, obviously there's anger, but I try to
Sure.
have a bit of compassion, but also it also shows to me the monster in our society and how everything is connected.
Well, and how it's a survival skill because I
Yeah.
see it in women all the time in work too. Do I
Mhm.
do I go along to get along at this table or do I challenge the white male authority figure here? And do I risk my feeding my children over, my authentic voice?
Right.
And the choices we make at 30 are different than the choices we will make at 60. And
Absolutely.
it's why I like to work with women over 40, because once
Mhm.
that hormonal shift begins to occur, the clarity begins to come. They've empty
Right.
nested. Now they've got some resources, some time, and some
Mhm.
individuation that has occurred or is ready to pop
Absolutely.
that can shift that next stage.
Absolutely. And that is beautiful. It's one of the benefits too of aging. Being able, I feel like it's almost like you get to drive around the entire mountain. You're so fortunate to see everything. You get me? And I feel like when people unfortunately don't get there, it's really sad because you wonder what could your life have been if you got to see more? How would you have changed or perceived things differently? But also to kind of challenge you a bit, while I do think there's a lot of mature individuals, women especially over 40, who get this chance to look at their lives differently, I also notice people at 40 kind of hit this crisis, trying to figure out where they're going next. And it
Mhm.
doesn't always kind of go towards the self-improvement route. I'm
No,
wondering,
it
what
goes
do
towards
you,
self-preservation.
right,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
self-preservation.
And it often goes toward whatever childhood programming they haven't yet deconstructed.
Right.
And if they are still trying to be the perfect wife, the perfect mother, now the perfect grandmother, trying to fit in their church or in their community and their whatever, their trad wife can last their whole life. The unexamined life, right?
It's so true. And thank you for saying trad, right? Because that's what I was thinking about.
Right.
I was
That's
kind of
right.
thinking, as you hit, when you're in your 40s and 50s, you're a leader ever more. Especially younger women are looking to you for guidance. So I'm wondering, how do you frame that to them? What, especially if they're coming to you and saying, I want to be the trad wife. And I see that I can live on this big acre, and me and my husband have a very house on the prairie
That's right.
experience.
That's right. And how much of yourself do you have to put away to hold that space? How much of yourself do you lose in that process? Because I've lived that life. And I know I have been the 22 years with all the things. And I know that the risk of losing your church family, your your estrangement from your children if you don't fit the model and of do I have biblical grounds to divorce? So I worked with a woman, fun fact, I worked with a woman once who was in her 40s and her husband was a raging alcoholic in a church leadership position in Idaho, actually. And and the leadership of the church, they would never confront him because, he was protected. And when she took these family problems to them, they made her the unsubmissive wife trope instead. And when I met with her and worked with her, she was in her mid 40s. Their children had empty nested. She was right where we all need to be for first order change. And her decision in this life, she had a heart condition and she wouldn't go to the doctor because her decision was my only exit strategy. The only permissible exit strategy is death because divorce is not an option and they're not going to protect me from this man. And so I'm going to be in this, I'm going to honor my vows and I'm going to die in this marriage. And she was hastening her death, not suicide, couldn't do that. She was praying for an early death so she could die with dignity and save the system. There's a story. A lot of women do that. A lot of women do that. Sad.
It is. And she does this consciously.
And she consciously, that was her conscious
Yeah.
choice. And when she got to that point, because I work with people until they decide what they want, because I'm not
Mhm.
here to fix you
Right.
or change you,
Hmm.
then okay, then. You know what? It was the same as if she had terminal cancer and was choosing not to treat it. I will support whatever you decide to do, but I can't watch you do that. I can't watch. So,
So devastating to kind of witness that, you
yeah,
know.
yeah,
I imagine you get the opposite as well. But every time I hear that, it's heartbreaking. As one who's also seen like the church and religion, my grandfather is very much a pastor and very much took to the idea that a man dominates everything. And he took it to a whole nother level. And so witnessing him being treated with like a golden plate to get dinner in front of the TV while his wife is taking care of, the grandchildren and cleaning up the home. Mind you, she's a nurse. So she's on her feet already. He's a bus driver. He has a job. He's doing his thing, but there's an imbalance. So when you talk about the end of life, well, for this lady, almost end of life decision here, it's heart wrenching to see these decisions, especially for me and my family. My grandmother unfortunately got a really bad illness, probably from not taking care of herself. And that wasn't probably conscious. She just was doing what she thought was best.
sure.
But once she got to that point, predictably, her partner wasn't as there. And so
Mhm.
for him, it's like the kids will take care of this. I'm going to go over here. And
Right.
even though she's dedicated 50 years. So for me, I had that front row seat and I was like, I don't ever want this. It was terrifying. But
Right.
then also seeing in my family other people who saw that and thought, wow, she was dedicated to him for 5 decades. I
Right.
wish I could have that. So
Hmm.
I'm wondering, kind of bringing this forth, as women overall, what do you feel like needs to be done or can be done in order for us to really see things as they are and not looking at these institutions as being kind of these milestones in our lives?
Well, I just said to somebody, I just finished a conference on home for the holidays because these are the seasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I said to them, you know, people think life does not begin at 40. 40 is the messy middle. There's life before, there's the messy middle of menopause, and it's not your mama's menopause because you're lasting a lot longer now than they did. And then there is the dreams without drama on the other side if you navigate this well. And navigating midlife means looking at the bill of goods you were sold, your family and what you learned there, your culture, what the limitations have put on you, and then you get to pick in your full mental, physical, spiritual authority how you're going to move forward, and more importantly, in my age group, and what legacy you're going to leave.
Beautiful. That hits. You're right.
Yeah.
It's so true, but really analyzing your life.
Yeah,
And
well, everything, even racial equity, the women who come to me because they say, I'm an ally and whatever. It's like good. Because what has racism cost you? Because until it costs us something, we're not going to have the strength or the passion or the stamina for the fight ahead. It has to be personal. If I look at women who have resisted across cultures and nationalities in war times or in the Underground Railroad, or they got involved because somebody close to their heart that they knew and loved got hurt by the system, and it emboldened them to take a stand. It only matters when it happens to us or ones we love. It only matters about trans rights when I have a trans grandchild or a trans child that I have to protect. Damn it. Otherwise, I don't care what you do in your dressing room. But when it matters to me, then the personal becomes political. I have a question for you. So in your notes, you talked about code shifting, code switching
mhm.
in therapy. And I want us, our audience, to learn more about code switching because it came up last season with two guests I had. And one of them, and we developed good rapport here.
Mhm.
And one of them was talking about how she was trained. She was a creative out of California, a very creative fashion designer, and worked in the
Ooh.
in the entertainment industry. And she was taught from childhood to only
Mhm.
speak the King's English in front of white people. It had to be. She couldn't speak her dialect and so the amount of code switching that she had done by the time she was 40 was so ingrained and indoctrinated that I was trying to learn. And I said, okay, so, we're having good rapport here. We had talked through
Mhm.
over half of the conversation by then. I said, can you give me an example of what that is? What is code switching? I had never heard the term before.
Mhm.
And she tried, but it wouldn't come out her throat. She came in
Mm.
once and she came in twice and she said, I can't do it. Can't do it. So that no like trust. So for white women to step into social media places and think because you call yourself an ally, that means you are safe or that anybody feels safe. The only way that you become a safe person is when the people around you say you are.
Mm.
You don't get to put that flag and say, but I'm one of the good ones.
Right.
No, that doesn't fly.
That's a good
So,
point. Right.
so what can you tell me about what you mean by code switching in a
Mhm.
therapeutic setting? How does that work?
Absolutely. It's very interesting. And I think it depends on each person. I definitely align with what the creative was kind of speaking about. It is so true. Maybe not the King's version of like English in particular, but whether it's like parents, grandparents in particular too, or even when you're at school, there's an expectation for you to kind of have a very honestly whitewashed way of speaking. It's unfortunate that she wasn't able to bring it forth. I don't know if that was the environment. I don't know if it was like the podcast itself. Who knows? But for me, code switching is laden with a lot of curse words, but I digress. Anywho.
You're welcome to use them because fuck bombs are my thing. Okay. You're good here.
So I feel safe.
Yes, there you go.
But it is kind of hard because code switching kind of connects to other things too, the way that you wear your hair, your clothing, even the food that you may bring in. Do you want it to smell throughout the room? And then now there's all these weird questions and so on and so forth. But absolutely, even amongst other Black people, we talked about that internalized anti-Blackness. If I'm not able to pronounce my words in a particular way and sound like I'm intelligent, even amongst white people too, I've come at them and say, "Hey, what's up? How you doing?" Da 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 da, and they're looking at me like, "Are you okay?" And then I'm like, "Are you doing all right, ma'am? How do you need this or that?" And the all of the anxiety, you can see it leave their shoulders.
Uh-huh.
And so, absolutely, it's a survival tactic.
Right.
Um, for me, being Haitian American too, and I think for other immigrant families, it goes even further because being able to speak your language or having an accent is kind of not celebrated in America. And let me
Yeah.
remove the kinda.
I was
So,
gonna say, right?
yeah.
No, it'll get you thrown in an ice truck pretty soon. Yeah.
And questioning your intelligence, your ability. So when I do therapy with people, a lot of it is cursing, being able to use whatever words we want, but that is definitely a gradual process. And I think it aligns with therapy, wanting to like help people to find their voice again. But it's really telling that people can be, so creative, and
Uh,
it's still
eh,
kind of hard.
I love that you're here because I feel like I can ask you the harder questions that people and you're going to tell me some truth here
Hey.
that our audience needs to hear. Tell
Mhm.
me why it is uh, tell me why if I say you are so articulate, that does not land well.
Because people, I mean, racism.
Well, I
And
do, but I want you to explain it like I'm a first grader.
absolutely. Thanks. And also, I feel very comfortable here as well.
Good.
Um, I've actually gotten that before. And hmm, the reason it's so disrespectful, to be honest, is
Yes.
because many Black people are intelligent and it's devalued. I can't tell you how many times I've raised my hand in class or I've given people an answer and they did not listen. And they went to somebody else and they said the same thing. And then they ended up looking foolish and everybody's looking at them. This has been in science rooms. This has been in English classrooms. This has been in so many different spaces. So it feels like an extension of that as once again, do you really belong here? Are you sure? Oh, wow, I'm so surprised you're well behaved. Well, everybody here is articulate if we're going to be doing certain types of work. So why are you pointing that out with me? And I also feel like it's another example of the dominant white society kind of pushing off their racism onto the oppressed group. It's like, oh, wow, I didn't know you could do this. But it's also to me, it's like, where have you been? Other groups of people would not be asking this if they had exposure and if they're, really contending with it. But especially amongst white people, there's this tendency to be so surprised by other racial groups. And I think it really highlights the lack of humanity that's been normalized as a result of the history.
Right.
So,
And can we talk about generational trauma?
mhm.
And because the part of the things I started doing in my genealogy, when I realized, my mom said I was a Heinz 57, we really didn't have I don't have a culture or a nationality to claim, we just we're part of the melting pot, okay? And so when I started deconstructing that, I started going back through my genealogy. I'm all the way back to the 1500s now. Funny how different parts of the tree die out on the women's side because women weren't even named. They were at some point.
Right.
And and there was a point to that. This is going to be a pause in the thing. And where were we going
You,
with that?
oh, good. We're talking about why is articulate, like kind of
Oh
seeing
yeah,
everything
yeah,
is
yeah. It
amazing.
was
And
it was about that, but now I've
mhm.
lost it. So we'll move on. It'll
It's
come
okay,
back.
it'll come back, right?
Yeah.
But I felt what you were saying. I've heard that before from other like white people as far as, and especially those who have been allies, who have been really working on their humility,
Right.
feeling like they don't have as much of a culture.
Right, right. And so when I started digging into that, what we
Mhm.
had was erased history, right? So I'm always
There's
looking for
that.
the hidden history to put on the table. So we had
Hmm.
a lot of that. And we had a homogenous, the only ones that you say are telling you to be homogenous are the ones who don't have a history of their own. We are the ones that I can't point to, oh, it was Irish or it was African or it was Haitian or wherever it is. Because with that, knowing your ancestry, you also bring forward all of their wisdom, all of their learning, all of their healing comes forward with you. But when you become, I don't know what the right word is. I'm going to call it homogenized. But when you become
Hmm.
homogenized for generations, so much so that you hide your history so you can survive,
Right.
then your offspring, they live with all the crazy in the DNA, but none of the understanding of why.
Absolutely.
That makes sense?
Wow. It makes a lot of sense and beautifully said. And thank you for that perspective too. Another reason why I feel like when we have proper allyship, this is the beauty of it. Is there's really a lot of beautiful dialogue because it helps me to understand too from my perspective. Because the beast seeks to separate. But anywho, I love how you said that. But that is so true. The generational trauma that kind of lives in and how you kind of tuck away your history as a part of kind of the practice I do with people, part of it is this cultural formation, I think assessment is called. And in it, we kind of talk about their history, talk about how have you delved back. I can't tell you how many people don't really know about their own culture, haven't read books of their culture. And when they start to, how much strength can kind of happen. Um, Especially with this last election, it was really devastating for many groups of people. But one of the ways we kind of healed together was kind of going into the past and learning about other moments where there was struggle and how people within our different groups were able to overcome. But it's absolutely a part of manipulating and controlling people, right? Breaking them down and then building them back up in your image. So
Yeah.
definitely a big part of reclaiming oneself is taking
And
that
so
journey.
when you're working with those people and
Mhm.
and they're reclaiming their cultural pride and history.
Mhm.
How do you move them forward through that?
Oh man, so many different ways outside of being direct. I find with therapy that the best way to influence is to influence yourself
Yeah.
in a weird way. And
Mhm.
so for me, I will change my hair, for instance. I'll purposefully, like, I'll wear my natural hair and see how my clients react.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes there's like some racist behavior, and I anticipate that with some of them.
Yeah.
But if they're working with me, usually there's a willingness because I'm very anti um, all the things that are horrible, more or less. So I'll do that, and it'll help them hopefully to kind of see their own culture. I'll talk about my own culture, not in a narcissistic way, but kind of self-disclosure as they're talking about their own struggles. In addition, I'll talk about like different holidays that may be coming up and what that may or may not mean to them, especially if they're bringing this up. And then overall, connecting the dots between their own kind of history of struggle and talking about what would your ancestors look like today living through you? What are some of the things that they may not have been able to do or have seen that you can bring forth? So there's kind of this kind of how can I say, forgive me as the word, but kind of reunifying them.
Yep.
And so that all of the consequences of the capitalism and classism and sexism and all of that, what it's trying to do by separating us, trying to bring it back together in the same way for the white dominant society as they're connecting with people of color in a genuine way. They're reconnecting to that fabric of humanity. So it is really hard because people don't always want to do it. And there's
Oh,
levels to where they're willing to go. But I find when they are able to embrace it, their growth is exponential.
yeah. And I'm sure that in your practice, as in mine, you meet
Mm-hmm.
people where they are. You take them as far as they're willing to go. You give
Mm-hmm.
them resources when it's time to part. And should they ever decide that they need some more, I'm here.
Right. You got the
Be-
whole spiel.
yeah, that's right. I've been working with highly functioning addicts and alcoholics for over 30 years. And so and their families. And so
Beautiful.
I pretty much know when to hold on and when to let go.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
that's
beautiful.
good.
Man.
But I have another question for you.
Okay.
Because you brought it up. Let's talk about that last election. And I want to talk about it because we can, and because not many people are, and that's what we
True.
do here. Raw, real, and relatable. I was on TikTok when that last one happened, and I got more involved in a campaign and politics than I ever have in my life because it was so critical. I'm a recovered Republican way before that election. However, I was I've been on my own deconstructing for about 3 years and an advocate. I want to be more than an ally, but an advocate and honestly an accomplice. So in the work. But when the election happened, and these white women, half of them, 52%, went for against what I thought was our best interest. And the black women showed up at the polls like we were all supposed to. I'm just going to say what it is. And the black women took a step back with a big FU, understandably and rightfully, and said, you, you didn't do your part. We did our part. You didn't do your part. Don't ask me because I'm going to be busy circling the wagons protecting my family because now we're at risk. And you did the same thing now that your grandmothers did during the voting and that your other ancestors did during slavery. It's the same story, different era. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Them stepping back was I'll cry still, not white woman tears. Best thing they ever could have done. Best thing they ever could have done because all you silly little, I'm just going to say it, shit. All you silly little white women with all your silly little blue bracelet ideas or whatever the hell you think, it's like, girl, you are just going to create more harm in your ignorance. And ain't nobody needs to be around that. But for me, I'm a little blue dot in a redneck town, stepped outside of my door the day after, and for the first time in my life, I had the experience of not knowing who was safe and who wasn't, even if they looked like me. And I spent a couple of weeks, I did a whole grieving series on it because I spent a couple of weeks, because I've got a redneck neighbor over here, that I was like, I I will hurt her if she tries to talk to me. I have never been so enraged at my sisters and in my life. However, it did shift the conversation at One Voice Evolving, and it certainly shifted me. And when I say thank you for stepping back and making us own and experience our fucking consequences, hard thing to do. I'm so sorry this happened to you. And I'm just pissed that we're not at a point where we can say, but it's never going to happen again.
It was horrible that
Yeah.
night. Oh my gosh, the tears.
Yeah.
And then just seeing it in so many people's faces. Like
Mhm.
it was just this cloud. But I feel your anger and I resonate with it so much. If it weren't for the fact that I have to protect myself and be like in check, I live
Yeah.
in a red town area as well. And there's MAGA stuff all over the place. And it's contrasted by the fact that people SNAP benefits for Thanksgiving. It's like it's in limbo. And I'm just like, how is this happening? It pisses me off about my people. I see Snoop Dogg, I see Ice Cube, I see these fools who are promoting it. And I'm just like, oh my God, there are little boys that you are literally sacrificing. And like, it's so aggravating. The greed, the
Yeah.
ignorance, and then just the lack of courage. It's always scary, it's, especially to me, when I look at white history, they love to talk about Mr. Who's on the dollar, like Andrew Jackson and all of them, and they're like all over the place. But I very little hear about Eugene B. Debs as like this big socialist who's like trying to fight the system. There's a little blurb about John Brown fighting against the system and taking up arms. But I would love to hear more about that. And of course, they're going to silence that because it doesn't fit the whole story. But anywho, when it comes to this election, it was extremely disappointing. Everything since has been nothing but sadness.
Yes.
I dip in and out as best as I can, and same thing with my clients. But it is extremely sad witnessing the cabal too between corporations, politicians, and even entertainment.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so as a therapist, how do you help folks find their balance in this shit show of a news cycle that we're in every day? I have found my peace place by only catching my news because I used to think it was true from everywhere, and now I think it's true nowhere. However, if I listen to it from a comedian's viewpoint, Saturday Night Live, which I haven't watched since I was a teenager, is now my favorite thing. And things like Jimmy Kimmel. I only watch the first 15 minutes. I don't care about the rest of the show, but it gives me the headlines in a way
Smart.
that doesn't break me, in
Yeah.
a way that gives me a chance to get some humor distance from it and go, and then I can
Mm,
go dig into the topics I want to know more about without picking up my phone and letting it scroll me and smack me upside the head in the middle of my day.
absolutely.
That makes
That is
sense?
brilliant. I love that idea. That is so good. May I take it? I feel like I can spread that. That is such a smart way, because my approach has always kind of been either create another account, like if you know you're very socially like active on media, have one that you kind of go into here and there, and then your main account. Some people I say like completely disconnect from it and maybe give yourself about 20 minutes a week to kind of get into it, or have your partner do it and kind of, you take turns, so that you can protect your mind. But I also want to highlight here, like, whether as women in the past, like our foremothers, or even as Black women in the past, like there's always been times of great strife. And let's be honest, our ancestors have gone through things that maybe we've never imagined. Thinking about even for like wartime, sending off your partner and not knowing if they're going to come back and having children and going to work. And this is the first time women are really in these factories. Who knows how they're being treated and so on. Or even dealing with like having your children separated from you or not being able to do your dreams. And having to recognize your legacy while you love your children is that everything that you wanted. And so recognizing the struggle that Earth has brought upon humanity many times, or humanity brought upon itself, I think could be helpful.
As we look forward into the generations that we're handing off to,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I noticed when we first started this year is that we in my age group have been through wars and rumors of wars. And, my father was World War II, and my husband and the father of my children was Vietnam. And we've had some not on our shores, right? We haven't had it hit home like this, but we've seen some things and we've endured some things. And my parents were the parents of depression. So we had scarcity and all that. But my children and my grandchildren have not had to face hard things like this before. They've had shooter drills in schools. By the grace of God, maybe they weren't first person observers of it, but they have all the anxiety produced by all those previous generations is what they're bringing to the table. Well, you're bringing now a knife to a gunfight in terms of experience of lean times and sacrifice. Have you considered that?
Absolutely. My parents came from, well, my father's an orphan.
Uh-huh.
So being given anything beyond being born was
Mm-hmm.
never kind of expected, like at least the way he would describe it. But
Yeah.
on a greater sense, absolutely. I think they're feeling it with my Gen Z clients with the lack of work. And then a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the anger towards the boomers, feeling like they got screwed over.
Yeah.
Granted, you're right, they don't have the same things that have occurred throughout history, but they do have a declining empire. And I think that's a little bit different. And it's going to be interesting, especially with climate change into the 2030s.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the political instability that we're witnessing now, what does that look like in 20, 30 years? If America's built off of these Roman and Greco principles, those emperors started to really get out of hand towards the end, like any other empire. And so
Uh-huh.
with Donald Trump coming into power and society being okay with it, seemingly, I think he might have done stuff or did, but anywho,
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what that's telling. And so you're right, it is going to be very interesting. And I think instead of people coming, I think it's interesting because it's almost like a king having to abdicate his throne.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes a different skill level than when you're kind of taking over a kingdom and becoming the king.
Got it. Yeah. And so a declining empire, can you tell me more about that?
Oh man, my cynicism, you're entering that world.
Ooh.
But happy you're excited. But when I was like in college, I used to hear from this guy on Tumblr, like America's falling, all of this stuff. And I used to be like, okay, infrastructure is declining, education is not the best, healthcare is in making sure everybody has it has been a problem. But I don't know if it's totally declining when we look around the world. I think once Trump got into presidency again, especially on these very fascist principles, it was especially concerning. And it let me recognize that, yes, it is decaying. Because if people are able to bring into power somebody who has no sense, who doesn't understand what he's doing, who has no decorum to him, I mean, even George W. Bush sitting in that classroom, having to keep his composure, that is levels above. And he was a joke when I was a child. I remember the boot being thrown at him. And so to see this steady decline in my lifetime and then looking at other parts of history, I'm like, this is absolutely horrible. And then now we're kind of hoping that another FDR is going to come in. He still wasn't amazing as far for Black people, but he still brought in programs that helped. He was able to get the rich to kind of give up some money. I don't think Trump is ever going to do that. And I don't know if any other political leader is going to have that. In addition, when I look at American dominance, it is declining. I think what Putin is doing, especially with him with Ukraine, he's obviously trying to do a power play so that he can only grow his power on that side of the world. And he understands that America is weak right now. The fact that he's potentially been able to influence politics like this is very telling. And to be quite honest with you, as much as I don't like Putin, he is a strong-headed leader. Like, he seems like a leader. He has it and he lives it. Him on the horses and the martial arts and everything, he's a man of discipline, even if I do not agree with him. And so I think what we're witnessing, I don't think it's going to get much better.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's really not the greatest thing to hear, but I think it's the reality.
So, and I want to talk about the reality versus the image. I did a stint before I was born in Vegas. Moved out of there when I was 40. And I tell people I did my 40 years in the desert. I'm never going back. But the last job I had there was for Agassi Enterprises at a time when he was first getting together with Brooke Shields. For anybody who knows, if you know, you know. And during that period of time, his motto, he had just won the French Open, and his motto and all of his advertising was image is everything. And I worked there just long enough to see that they walked to their talk. Image was everything. And I see in the Trump presidency that very thing. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's not what's behind the curtain. And what we do at One Voice Evolving is look behind the curtain and hope it's not the Wizard of Oz pulling the levers. But I think that the things that we are afraid of and the things that are being fed to us by media on either side of that fence are trying to create for you either an image of terror or an image of superiority that makes you feel better in the moment, but is not good for the community and the country in the long haul. Instant gratification. That's what social media is.
Broke that down beautifully. Thank you. That is so brilliant. I feel like I've been having that in my gut because I've heard people say that, but the way you just articulated it was really, really beautiful. And you're right, how on either side, they're still able to kind of use media to control the masses and to keep you in that state of terror or superiority, as you said. You know, I think the only reason I'm kind of seeing, sadly enough, is because Chris Hedges, this reporter, he talks a lot about this, about 1990s Yugoslavia as it was falling down, but also being Haitian once again, witnessing what happened in my home country and how it fell apart and how much other forces, of course, participated in it, but what that looked like, how it descended ever more into chaos. And I think hearing that from my great uncles, hearing that from grandparents, it's hard to hear those stories and then not look outside and be like, wait, is this deja vu? I'm starting to kind of see something here. And so it's really devastating. I'm wondering for you though, what do you see for the America in the future?
I live in daytime compartments at this point. Sufficient unto this day is all I can take in, and I regulate my body daily to navigate what's coming across my feed. I would, Maya, however, we're coming to the end of our hour, but I would really love to have you back on to talk about Haitian history because we've all heard about those awful Haitians, but we sure don't know a damn thing about them. And part of hidden history, particularly when it tracks so well for you into what's happening here and what's happening then. I would love to continue this discussion if you'd be willing. So, as a parting thought, or is there anything you wanted to touch on that we haven't? I'd love to hear what you would like our listeners to hear.
Absolutely. Well, to continue to tune in to One Voice Evolving, because absolutely, I co-sign everything you've been speaking about today. And I'm always, always, always grateful to be in front of wise women because that is something you have to earn and fight for. It's not something you just get to. And so when I get to witness it, this is real leadership. Some of the things we've spoken about here, it changes me. And now I'm ever more curious to learn and to become better, not as just a clinician, but as a person because of this conversation. So thank you for leading your space so beautifully so that I can come here and receive some of the fruits.
Oh, Maya, thank you. It's always good when two brilliant minds get together. The exchange is so powerful. And I always say
Mm.
when women gather, magic happens. We
Mm.
had magic today.
Absolutely.
I'm going to close out this segment and we'll start again.